shame, terror, helplessness. Turn away. Please. She dangled upside down from a cottonwood branch, her ankle lashed with coarse rope that bit into her skin. The midday sun pressed down from a bleached sky, indifferent and relentless. Every time she tried to push herself upright, her hair scraped through the cracked earth beneath her. Her breathing had gone ragged. Her voice was nearly gone. An older man stood watching from a few feet away. Caleb Horn didn't move immediately, not from confusion, but from experience. He'd come across situations like this before and understood how rarely they resolved without blood. His fingers drifted toward the blade at his hip, then stopped. For a moment, he nearly walked away entirely. From her position, he probably looked no different from whoever had done this to her. Just another weathered man with time and no decency. Her voice broke again, barely a whisper now. Turn away. Please. He stood there a beat too long. The wind pushed dust between them. Then Caleb looked away. Not reluctantly, not slowly. He turned the way a man does when he truly understands what's being asked. He pulled his kerchief from his neck and stripped off his outer shirt. He stepped toward her, eyes fixed on the rope, nowhere else, moving the way you move around something fragile. Don't move, he said quietly. She flinched anyway. The knife caught the light once. The rope split. She hit the ground hard, curled inward, and wrapped herself in the cloth he'd tossed over before she'd even landed. She breathed like someone hauled back from the edge of something dark. Caleb stepped away, gave her room, fixed his eyes on the far ridge and kept them there. No questions, no pity, just the sound of the wind and both of them breathing. After a long stretch of silence, she spoke again, but her voice had shifted. Not broken anymore, guarded. Who put you up to this? He frowned slightly. Nobody. I ride alone. She didn't believe him. Out here in conditions like these, of course she didn't. She got to her feet, unsteady, still wrapped in his shirt, and stumbled back a few paces. Caleb studied the ground without meaning to. Bruises yellowing across her wrists, drag lines in the dirt, boot prints overlapping one another. At least 3 sets. Maybe 4. And if they'd wanted her dead, she'd already be dead. That was the thing that settled into his chest like a stone. They were searching for something. They hadn't found it. So they'd left her breathing as bait, or leverage, or both. You're hurt, he said. She shook her head, still retreating. Then she ran. No warning. Just turned and disappeared into the dry scrub brush like smoke. Caleb stood at the base of that cottonwood for a long time afterward. The severed rope twisted slowly in the still air. The dust resettled around his boots. Something glinted near the tree's roots, a worn leather pouch. Inside it, a folded document, a land deed, signed, sealed, and notarized. Worth more than most men's lives in country like this. He looked toward the brush where she'd vanished. Then at the rope. Then at the long empty road stretching south toward town. He could leave. A man with as many years behind him as Caleb had earned the right to let other people's troubles stay their own. But her voice stayed with him. The way she'd said it. Not begging to survive. Begging to keep her dignity. He folded the deed carefully and tucked it into his coat. Then he gathered his reins, because now only one question remained. What kind of men leave a girl alive after something like that, unless they're planning to come back? Caleb didn't chase her through the brush. He'd lived long enough to know that tracking a frightened woman in dry country was a reliable way to get himself shot. Or worse. To earn exactly the wrong kind of reputation, instead he followed her trail patiently. The way you follow something you don't want to frighten further. Scattered dust, a snapped twig, a boot heel dragging slightly to the left. He tracked her toward town. By the time Tombstone came into view, the afternoon heat had softened just enough to make breathing easier. The town looked the same as always. Warped signage, dust-layered everything. Men leaning in doorways pretending they hadn't already noticed you. He tied his horse outside Ruth Callahan's boarding house without announcing himself. Ruth appeared before his knuckles hit the door. She always did. You've got that look again, she said. Like trouble introduced itself. Usually does, he answered. Inside, he set the folded deed on her table. Ruth didn't reach for it. She just looked at the name printed across the top. Whitmore. Her expression shifted. That girl's been playing a hand no one could win, she said. Then quieter. And half this town already knows her name. Caleb studied her. Then why aren't they doing anything? Ruth gave him the kind of tired look that carries years of watching the wrong people get away with things. Because Silas Creed has made sure that helping her comes with a price most folks aren't willing to pay. He asked about the details. She gave them plain Nora Whitmore, 19 years old. Father dead 3 months back. Small horse ranch along the river bend. Modest acreage, good water, better soil. The kind of land that draws attention from men who already have too much of everything else. Creed had wanted it. When she hadn't sold, things started going wrong. Fences cut in the night. Water lines cracked. Livestock disappearing with no tracks left behind. And then came the stories. The kind that spread through a town like smoke under a door, making people look away instead of toward. The law? Caleb asked. Ruth's mouth tightened. You mean Sheriff Dolan? She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. Bought law wasn't law. In a place like Tombstone, the truth was just another tool. Whoever held it could swing it however they wanted. Night came on slow. Caleb stayed. He hadn't planned to. But the image of that girl under the cottonwood wouldn't release him. The way she'd asked him not to look. Not for survival, but for something harder to name. Late into the night, the door opened without a sound. Caleb didn't go for his gun. He already knew. Nora stood in the doorway. She still wore his shirt over her own clothes, and she watched him the way a deer watches before it decides whether to bolt. But this time she didn't run. She stepped inside and pulled the door shut behind her. Her right hand held a small derringer, not shaking. Not entirely still either. Her eyes went to the deed on the table. You kept it. Didn't feel right to do otherwise, he said. I watched the window first, she told him. Long enough to know you hadn't taken it to Dolan. She studied him for a measured moment, calculating, deciding. Then she asked the only question that mattered. How much time do we have before they come back? He didn't answer immediately, because he already knew. They weren't waiting. They were already moving, and this time they wouldn't leave her hanging from a tree. They'd come to take everything. The land, the papers, and any loose ends still, breathing. So the real question had already changed. It was no longer if they were coming, it was whether two people could hold a line against men who owned the town. Caleb didn't sleep. He sat beside the window with the brim of his hat angled low, watching the street below, listening to the rhythm of footsteps passing in the dark. Nora kept her back to the far wall, never fully still, never fully loose. By the time gray light touched the eastern edge of the sky, they were already in the saddle. No lengthy discussion. No ceremony. If those men were moving, they weren't going to announce themselves with daylight. The Whitmore Ranch sat silent when they arrived. Too silent. The gate hung at an angle, its hinge torn clean from the post. The fence wire had been cut in straight sections, not torn by animals or weather, but sliced deliberately. Methodical. This had been planned. Nora slowed without speaking. Caleb watched her face and understood. This wasn't just property to her. It was the last thing her father had built while he was still alive. They dismounted near the house. Caleb moved ahead. Checked the barn, empty, no horses, no feed disturbed, no useful tracks left behind. They've been through here already, he said. I know, she replied. Inside, drawers had been pulled open and left that way. Floorboards shifted from their original positions. Someone had searched the place, not desperately, but thoroughly. Nora dropped to her knees in the far corner and worked her fingers beneath a loose plank. A pause. Then her shoulders dropped. Not in defeat, but in relief. She lifted out a cloth-wrapped bundle. My father used to say that land doesn't get stolen with guns, she said quietly. It gets stolen with paper first. She held the bundle against her chest. He made sure the paper was somewhere safe. Caleb exhaled slowly. That was what they were after. That was what all of this had been about. Nora's jaw set. They're not getting it, and with that something shifted. Not survival anymore. Not running. A decision. Before either of them could speak again, they heard horses. Fast and coming from the wrong direction. Caleb didn't wait. Back door, they moved. No scrambling, just controlled speed. The first man came through the front entrance before they'd fully cleared the rear, boots striking hard against the floor, voice projecting ahead of him like he owned the building. She won't be far. Caleb steered Nora toward the corral fence. One of the riders had circled wide and cut off the most direct path. No more options for concealment. The man dropped from his saddle and grabbed for Nora's arm. She froze. Just for a second. The same place in her chest that the cottonwood had reached. Then something in her eyes changed. She tightened her grip on a broken fence rail and brought it across his wrist with everything she had. The gun hit the dirt. Caleb stepped in immediately. 2 strikes direct, no wasted effort, and the man went down. The second rider came in harder. Older approach, cruder angle. It didn't work any better. They went into the dirt together, boots kicking up a low curtain of dust. Caleb absorbed a hit to the ribs, rotated his weight, and drove the man down hard. Nora kicked the loose gun well out of reach. "Ride," Caleb said. This time she didn't hesitate. They broke for the dry riverbed path behind the property. Shouting followed, but no pursuit, not yet. They rode until the ranch was lost behind heat shimmer and distance. Then Caleb slowed. Nora glanced back once, then faced forward, no tears. Just something harder and steadier that had taken their place. They hadn't taken everything from her. Not yet, which meant this wasn't finished. If you're still with me on this ride, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Because what came next wasn't just a fight over a few acres of land. It was the kind of thing a man carries in his chest for the rest of his years. They didn't push far that time. Caleb brought the horses down to a dry bend in the riverbed, where the banks rose enough to give cover, and the scrub grew dense enough to hide 2 people who needed to think. Nora slid down first. Her legs held, but only just. Caleb checked the horizon and the ground behind them. "Nothing close," he said. "Not yet." She pressed the bundle to her chest. "So what do we do now?" The question sat heavy between them. Running bought time. It didn't buy anything else. Caleb looked back toward Tombstone, then at her. "If we keep moving, you lose the land anyway," he said. She was quiet. "If we go back, we go back loud." That was the line. Not escape. A stand. She nodded once. Then we stopped running. They waited through the long pull of afternoon, then moved when dusk softened the town's edges and the usual noise of an evening settled in. Cards, liquor, and men performing indifference. Ruth didn't ask questions when they came in through the back. She listened. Creed, the land, the deed. Dolan, that last name made her pause the longest. "Then you don't go near him," she said. "We won't," Caleb replied. Ruth leaned slightly forward. "There's a federal marshal working through Cochise County. Word is he's not the kind who negotiates his integrity." Caleb looked at her steadily. "Can you reach him?" A quiet smile crossed her face. "Already have. That small piece of information changed everything. Now they just needed to hold the situation long enough for it to matter. The plan they put together wasn't complicated. It didn't need to be. Nora would let it be known, quietly, through the right ears, that she was ready to sign the land over. Cash exchange tonight at the old stable behind the main street. The kind of arrangement Creed wouldn't let pass. Night settled soft and warm over Tombstone. The stable stood half-lit by a single lantern, its light spilling unevenly across the hay-covered floor. Nora stood near the center, the deed in her hands, her spine straight, her breathing controlled. From a distance she looked composed. Caleb, watching from the shadows, could see what the distance hid, the tension in her knuckles, the effort it cost her to hold still. She wasn't the girl from the cottonwood tree anymore. That much was clear. The footsteps arrived first. Then voices. Creed entered the way powerful men do, like the room had already agreed to make space for him. Dolan followed a step behind. That told Caleb everything he needed to confirm. Creed looked at Nora and smiled. "You made the smart choice." She didn't return it. "The deal is simple," she said. Level. Unhurried. He stepped closer. "Too close. You should have said yes back when it would have cost you less." He let that settle, then added, "I tried the easy road with your father, too." A small, casual lift of his shoulders. Things didn't work out for him either. Behind him, Dolan's hand rested near his hip, a badge without law behind it. Just a prop for a man who'd never earned what it represented. Nora didn't step back. Didn't waver. And that was precisely when Caleb understood Creed hadn't come to make a transaction. He'd come to close a chapter. One way or another, Caleb shifted, his weight in the shadows. The next move would determine who walked out of that stable he stepped forward before. Creed's fingers reached the deed. That's far enough? Everything stopped. Creed turned slowly, his smile dropping one careful degree at a time. Dolan's hand moved lower. Nora held the papers without trembling, without releasing them, like they were the last solid thing in a room that had started to tilt. Creed exhaled like a man done pretending. You should have let this go, old man. Caleb said nothing. Some moments don't require words. Dolan moved first. The lantern swung on its hook, once, and threw all three shadows sideways across the wall. That moment of shifting light was his mistake. Caleb closed the distance before the gun cleared leather. 2 strikes clean and without hesitation. Dolan hit the floor, his badge catching the lamplight as it settled into the hay. Meaning nothing now. Creed reached for his own weapon. Nora saw it. For a fraction of a second, she hesitated, not because she didn't know what she was doing, but because she understood exactly what it meant. Then she made her choice. The shot was sharp in the enclosed space. Not aimed to kill, aimed to stop. Creed's hand snapped back. His gun dropped. The room went still. Outside, boots hit the ground. The marshal hadn't been as far back as Creed had assumed. He entered without drama. Read the room without needing it explained. And within the hour, the papers were laid out and the lies built around them fell apart in plain language. No complicated maneuvering. Just the truth with someone present who wasn't afraid of it. For the first time and longer than anyone in that town could clearly remember, people looked at Nora Whitmore and saw her accurately. Not a rumor. Not an obstacle. Just a young woman who had refused, at every turn, to be reduced. Days went by. The dust that had been kicked up began to settle. But something underneath Tombstone had shifted. Quietly. The way foundations move when the pressure above them finally eases. Caleb stayed longer than he'd planned. He repaired the fence line at the Whitmore Ranch. Cleared debris from the well. Did the kind of steady, unhurried work that doesn't announce itself. Nora worked alongside him. Not behind, not in his shadow, but beside him, equal in effort and pace. The evenings on the porch were quiet. 2 people sitting in the late light, not saying much, not finding that absence uncomfortable. Somewhere in those evenings, Caleb stopped thinking about the road, and Nora stopped watching him like a stranger. I've heard a great many stories over the years. The ones that stay with me aren't about who was the most powerful in the room. They're about who chose not to look away, when looking away would have been far easier. So let me ask you something. When life sets something difficult directly in your path, do you step around it? Or do you step toward it the way Caleb did? And if you've ever been where Nora was, misread, dismissed, the whole world seeming to lean against you, what did it take to stand back up? If this story gave you something to sit with, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one waiting. I'll be straight with you. This story was gathered and shaped to carry